President Biden in Portsmouth, Virginia today, fielding a reporter's question about herd immunity against COVID-19. Herd immunity is when enough members of a population are immunized against a virus that the virus basically can't make inroads. It can't spread in that community any longer. Resistance in the community is so high, the virus basically has nowhere to go, and so it stops spreading, and that's how it goes away. The way you get to herd immunity safely is through vaccines. Since our country's vaccination campaign launched in December, health officials and journalists have been asking how fast we need to vaccinate Americans in order to reach herd immunity here. How many people need to get vaccinated in order to reach herd immunity? Will we reach herd immunity? Right now, more than 145 million Americans have had at least one dose of the vaccine. That's 56% of the adult population in America. Vaccines for kids aged 12 and up may be approved as soon as this next week. But the rate of vaccinating adults is slowing, as this graph shows. We had a daily average of more than 3 million doses a day as of last month. Now the daily average is just over 2 million doses a day. And then the New York Times put up this little nightmare of a headline today. Quote, reaching herd immunity is unlikely in the U.S., experts now believe. The headline is fairly crushing, I will admit. But the point of the article and the text of it, the ideas behind it are more interesting than just that. Quote, daily vaccination rates are slipping. There's widespread consensus among scientists and public health experts that the herd immunity threshold is not attainable, at least not in the foreseeable future, and perhaps not ever. Instead, though, they are coming to the conclusion that rather than making a long-promised exit, the virus will most likely become a manageable threat that will continue to circulate in the United States for years to come, still causing hospitalizations and deaths, but in much smaller numbers. How much smaller is uncertain and depends in part on how much of the nation and the world becomes vaccinated and how the coronavirus evolves. Joining us now is the reporter who wrote that article, Apoorva Mandavilli, New York Times science and global health reporter. Apoorva, thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks very much for having me.
I know that reporters don't always write the headlines that appear on their stories. When you saw your story appear in print and on the New York Times website with that headline on it, did you know that you were going to ruin a lot of people's days? That it was going to feel like nightmare news for a lot of people?
Well, I was really hoping people would read beyond the headline, to be honest. I had a conversation with my editor about that headline, and what we decided is that it's true that there's a lot more subtlety, and I'm glad you think that the rest of the article was interesting. But what my editor felt, rightly, I think, is that what's new here is that we're hearing for the very first time that we may not reach herd immunity, and that is a big deal.
What is the difference between herd immunity and a manageable level of infection in the country?
I mean, in some ways, that's just degrees of difference, right? Herd immunity, it's really a continuum. So right now, we may be at 60% of the population is immune one way or the another, either because they were infected with COVID or because they are vaccinated. And we may need to get to 80-85% to get to that herd immunity threshold. But that doesn't mean that that's just 0 or 100. All along the way, the more people we vaccinate, the fewer hospitalizations and deaths we will see. And that's really what we're trying to get to here.
I was struck by one of the experts who you spoke to who expressed that in pretty blunt terms, saying even when we were hoping for herd immunity, it was never going to be that you got there, you raised the flag, it's over, and you never thought of it again. It was always going to be something that we and public health experts and public health officials had to keep an eye on in terms of a circulating virus that has proven its ability to kill populations wholesale, and our ability to fight it off will always depend on some sort of race against the virus's efforts to mutate away from our mitigation efforts. It was sort of always going to be a push me, pull you contest.
It was always going to be that, and that's because we were never going to have 100% protected, at least not in the foreseeable future. I mean, if you think about something like measles, the U.S. actually has a huge number of people protected from that, right? We actually do have herd immunity for that as a nation. But as you know, in New York, we've had outbreaks in the Orthodox Jewish community, and we do continue to have outbreaks now and then. So this is basically like that, except there are a lot more people who can still get sick. And so those outbreaks will be bigger and they will still lead to hospitalizations and deaths along the way.
Tell me about how the other news, I know you were part of the reporting team at the New York Times today that reported that Pfizer is likely, the FDA is likely to approve the Pfizer vaccine for kids aged 12 to 15. It's already approved for kids 16 and up. That prospect of being able to vaccinate younger teenagers and kids, and presumably with the clinical trials that are underway right now, kids even younger than that, does that affect the math at all, the projections in terms of how much of the country will be immune and how many communities will be susceptible to the kinds of outbreaks you just described?
Well, I think we definitely need as many kids as we can to get vaccinated, because kids under 18 are about 23% of the population. So if we don't vaccinate kids, there's just no chance in hell of ever getting the herd immunity. But even with all of them getting vaccinated, we still probably won't get there, is what the experts are saying. So we're expecting the FDA to authorize this vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds sometime early next week or later this week. And once those kids start getting vaccinated, we'll also start to hear results for the younger kids. But we need all of those children to really get vaccinated to get closer to herd immunity.
Apoorva Mandavilli, New York Times science and global health reporter. Thank you for your time and your clarity tonight. As I said, the headline is a scary thing. The ideas behind it are more nuanced, and the task at hand is the same. The more Americans get vaccinated, the quicker, the better we'll be. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.